I never planned for it to happen. But the truth is, some things don't happen suddenly. They grow in the quiet, in the moments no one notices. And by the time you realize it, you're already too far in to turn back. That night, with my husband asleep upstairs, the air between me and his two closest friends was already heavy with something unspoken. And when it finally crossed the line, it didn't feel rushed or careless. It felt like something we'd been holding back for years. The first time I noticed Daniel and Mark looking at me differently, I thought I was imagining it. They'd been in our lives for more than a decade, old college buddies of my husband, the kind of friends who show up for backyard barbecues, football games, and Christmas dinners. They helped us move furniture, fix leaky faucets, remembered my birthday when my husband forgot. I trusted them. They were part of the family. But last weekend, when I walked into the living room to refill the snack bowl, I felt it, the heat of their eyes on my back. It lingered even after I left the room. We didn't speak about it, not then, not ever. Silence has a way of hiding things, making you think nothing is growing when, deep down, it already is. That night, after the movie ended and my husband headed upstairs, I stayed behind under the excuse of tidying up. I told myself I'd just load the dishwasher and go to bed. But Daniel came back into the room, saying he'd forgotten his phone. He didn't leave right away. A minute later, Mark walked in without an excuse at all. The three of us stood there in the dim light, the TV still playing in the background. "You two should probably head out," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Neither of them moved. "Do you want us to?" Mark asked. I looked at him, then at Daniel. The truth was sudden and undeniable. I didn't. They'd known me for years, seen me before the fine lines, before I hid my gray roots. They remembered what I used to be before the routine and silence of marriage wore me down. And in that moment, they were looking at me like they remembered everything I had forgotten about myself. So I didn't tell them to go. I nodded once, and something in the room shifted. Daniel stepped closer, his hand brushing mine. The touch was gentle but deliberate, like holding a secret that had waited too long to be spoken. Mark stayed still at first, watching, the way you watch something you've imagined for years, but never thought you'd touch. They didn't speak, didn't exchange glances with each other. Their focus was entirely on me. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't reckless. It was slow, deliberate, almost reverent. I felt their hesitation, as if they weren't just thinking about what they wanted, but about what it meant. The quiet between us was almost deafening. Upstairs, I thought I heard a floorboard creak. I didn't look toward the stairs. I didn't want to know if my husband had moved. I had been married nearly 20 years. We were steady, predictable, maybe even comfortable. But comfort can also mean distance. We hadn't fought in months, but we hadn't touched in even longer. Somewhere along the way, I stopped expecting him to notice me. Yet Daniel and Mark always did. They remembered my favorite wine, they laughed at my jokes, they asked if I was okay in ways that made me believe they meant it.
It didn't start that night.
It had been building for years. Small glances over dinner, their hands brushing mine when they passed me a dish, conversations that stayed in my head longer than they should have. And when it finally tipped over that invisible line, it felt like coming up for air. Daniel moved first, his hand at my waist pulling me toward him with a quiet certainty. Mark stepped forward too, his voice low, asking if I wanted him to leave. I shook my head. That was the last question any of us asked. They didn't act like they were stealing something, they acted like they were giving something back. Every movement was unhurried, every glance laced with years of history. I felt seen in a way I hadn't in a very long time, and the way they looked at me made my chest ache. It was as if they were both trying to memorize me, not just touch me. We didn't speak about it afterward. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Mark sat back like he needed to catch his breath, and I sat on the rug with my knees to my chest, the flicker of the TV casting shadows across the room. No one asked what it meant. No one needed to. It had been decided long before that night. The next morning, my husband made coffee, like always. He kissed the top of my head, scrolled through his emails, and started talking about work. He had no idea. My hair was still damp from the shower, and the scent of last night clung faintly beneath the soap. I nodded in all the right places as he spoke, but My mind kept replaying every moment, the way Daniel's eyes lingered, the way Mark's voice dipped when he asked if I was sure. All day, the three of us moved through the house like nothing had happened. No glances, no touches. But there was a hum under the surface, a current only we could feel. I caught Daniel watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. Mark brushed past me in the kitchen, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his arm. That night, my husband said something at dinner that made my pulse stop. "I think one of them's into you," he said, not looking up from his plate. "Maybe both. They act different around you." My hand stilled over my glass. "They've always been like that," I said quickly. He nodded, smiling faintly. "Guess I can't blame them." I didn't sleep much that night. In the early hours, I got up to get water. Passing the guest room, I saw Daniel sitting on the edge of the bed, shirtless, elbows resting on his knees. Mark stood by the window, hands in his pockets. They both looked at me when I stepped in. "You okay?" Mark asked. I nodded slowly. "Do you want to stop?" Daniel asked after a pause. His voice was quiet but steady. I didn't answer right away. I looked at them, the two men who had been part of my life for so long, who had crossed a line with me, and who now stood there waiting to see if I would draw it again. "I don't know what I want," I admitted. That was the truth. They left the next morning without goodbyes, without messages. Just gone. And yet, every time I sit at the dining table where they once laughed with us, I wonder, did they leave to protect me? Or because I made them feel something they didn't want to carry? I kept everything quiet for years. My needs, my feelings, my hunger to be seen. And the moment I let any of it out, everything changed. Maybe it was wrong. But for one night, it felt like the most honest thing I'd done in a long time.